My name is Madison, and at 28 I thought I knew my family. That illusion crumbled the day my parents cornered me in my Manhattan penthouse demanding I sign it over to my sister Emma. When I refused, my father did something that exposed a web of lies spanning decades. What happened next destroyed our family forever, but also revealed the shocking truth about who I really am and why they never truly loved me. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined possible. Before we dive into this family nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you're ready for a story about family betrayal, calculated revenge, and justice finally being served, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this journey gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. 3 months earlier, everything seemed perfect in my carefully constructed world. I had built my real estate empire from nothing, turning a small inheritance from my grandmother into millions. The penthouse overlooking Central Park was my crown jewel, purchased with my own blood, sweat, and relentless determination. Emma, my 25-year-old sister, had always been the family favorite. While I worked 80-hour weeks building my business, she flitted from one failed venture to another, always landing softly because Mom and Dad cushioned every fall. Art school, then a boutique that lasted 6 months, followed by a brief stint as an influencer that netted her exactly 47 followers. The signs were there, but I chose to ignore them. The way Mom's voice would cool when I shared my achievements. How Dad would change the subject whenever I mentioned my success. The family dinners where Emma's latest project received enthusiastic support while my multi-million-dollar deals earned polite nods. It started with casual comments. "Madison, you have so much space in that penthouse," Mom would say during our weekly calls. "Emma really needs a fresh start after the boutique closure." Then came the suggestions about family investments and helping siblings in need. I brushed them off, assuming it was typical family guilt about my success. The morning they showed up unannounced, I was reviewing contracts for a major development project. Mom wore her disappointed mother expression while Dad carried a manila folder that would later haunt my dreams. Emma stood behind them, avoiding eye contact, which should have been my first red flag. "We need to talk," Dad announced, settling into my Italian leather sofa like he owned the place. "About family responsibility and doing what's right." What followed was a masterclass in manipulation. They painted Emma as a victim of circumstances, someone who deserved a chance to succeed like I had. They spoke about family legacy and keeping wealth within the bloodline. The penthouse, they argued, was too much for one person, and Emma needed stability to launch her new business venture. "She's your sister," Mom said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Family takes care of family." When I politely declined, explaining that the penthouse was my home and my sanctuary, their masks began to slip. Dad opened his folder, revealing legal documents already prepared. Transfer papers for the deed, complete with Emma's signature, and spaces marked for mine and their witnesses. "We've already spoken to a lawyer," Dad said coldly. "This is the most tax-efficient way to handle the transfer. Emma can take over the mortgage payments, and you'll still have your other properties." The audacity took my breath away. They had planned this ambush, complete with legal documents, assuming I would simply comply. Emma finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Madison, I really need this. You have so much already." That's when something inside me shifted. I looked at these people who had raised me, who I had loved unconditionally, and saw strangers. The way they sat in my home demanding my most precious possession, treating my success as something they had a right to redistribute. "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I bought it, I earned it, and I'm keeping it." Dad's face darkened. "You're being selfish, Madison. This family has given you everything." "What exactly has this family given me?" I asked, my voice rising. "I paid for my own college through scholarships and part-time jobs while you funded Emma's art school. I built my business from nothing while you co-signed loans for her failed ventures. What exactly do I owe you?" That's when Dad made his fatal mistake. In his anger, he revealed the truth he had hidden for decades. "You owe us because we took you in when nobody else wanted you," he shouted. "We gave you a name, a family, a chance at life, and this is how you repay us." The room fell silent. Emma's face went white. Mom looked like she wanted to disappear into the sofa cushions. And I felt my entire world tilt on its axis. "What did you just say?" I whispered. Dad realized his error immediately, but it was too late. The secret they had guarded for 28 years was out, hanging in the air like poison gas. "Madison, honey," Mom started, but I cut her off. "What did he mean took me in? What did he mean gave me a name?" The stammered explanations that followed shattered everything I thought I knew about myself. I was not their biological daughter. I was adopted, taken in as an infant when my teenage mother could not care for me. They had never told me had crafted an elaborate fiction about Mom's difficult pregnancy and my premature birth to explain why I looked nothing like them. But the worst part was yet to come. As Mom tearfully explained the adoption, Emma sat frozen, staring at her hands. Finally she looked up and I saw guilt written across her features. "Emma," I said slowly, "how long have you known?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally answered, her voice was barely audible. "Since I was 16. I overheard them talking about it. 12 years. She had known for 12 years and said nothing. Had watched me struggle with feeling different, feeling like an outsider in my own family, and had never offered a word of explanation or comfort. The betrayal was complete. Not only had my parents lied to me my entire life, but they had orchestrated this ambush to steal my home for their biological daughter. Emma, the golden child who could do no wrong, had been complicit in the deception for over a decade. As I sat there processing this information, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. They had played a long game and now it was my turn. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, like someone who owed them for basic human decency, then I would show them exactly what that looked like. But first I needed to know everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment they had chosen Emma over me because she was really their daughter while I was just the charity case they had taken in. The war had begun, and they had no idea what they had awakened. After they left that day, I sat alone in my penthouse, staring out at the city lights that had always comforted me. Everything I thought I knew about my identity had crumbled in the span of an hour. But as the shock wore off, something else emerged: clarity. Pure, cold, analytical clarity that cut through the emotional fog like a laser. I spent the next 72 hours doing what I did best: research and strategic planning. If my entire life had been built on lies, then I needed to know the truth. Every detail, every hidden document, every carefully constructed fiction that had shaped my existence. The first call was to my lawyer Marcus Chen, who had handled all my real estate transactions. Without revealing the family drama, I asked him to conduct a comprehensive search of my adoption records. What he found was more devastating than I had imagined. My birth mother, Sarah Collins, had been 17 when she gave birth to me. She had not willingly given me up. According to the records Marcus uncovered, my adoptive parents had essentially bought me through a private arrangement, paying Sarah's medical bills and providing a substantial sum for her cooperation. She had wanted to keep me but had been pressured by her own family and the financial incentives my future parents offered. But the most shocking discovery was what happened after the adoption. Sarah had tried to contact me multiple times over the years. Letters, birthday cards, even attempts to visit that had been blocked by my adoptive parents. They had told her I did not want contact, just as they had told me she had never tried to reach out. Armed with this information, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator to find Sarah Collins and began documenting every lie my adoptive family had told me. If they wanted to play dirty, I would show them what dirty really looked like. The investigation into my family's finances revealed patterns I had been too blind to see. Every time Emma's ventures failed, money disappeared from accounts that my father managed. Money that should have gone to me, given that I had been contributing to family investments and trusts since I started earning significant income. My adoptive parents had been systematically redirecting funds meant for my inheritance to support Emma's lifestyle. The trust fund my grandmother had left for me had been depleted to pay for Emma's art school, her failed boutique, and her current expensive apartment in Soho. They had been stealing from me for years, justifying it as taking care of their real daughter. But I needed more than financial records to execute my plan. I needed leverage, and I needed allies. That's when I remembered something Emma had said during one of her rare moments of honesty about her latest relationship. Emma was dating Marcus Rivera, the son of a prominent family in our social circle. What she did not know was that Marcus was married with 2 young children and had been using her as his escape from domestic responsibilities. I had discovered this months earlier through my own business networks, but had kept quiet, not wanting to hurt my sister. Now that information became a weapon. If Emma wanted to destroy my life by conspiring with our parents, then her own secrets were fair game. But I needed more than one scandal to bring down their entire house of cards. The breakthrough came when I accessed my father's business emails through a shared cloud account he had forgotten about. What I found there was a treasure trove of financial impropriety that went far beyond stealing from my trust fund. My father, who worked as a financial advisor, had been embezzling from several of his clients to fund Emma's lifestyle and maintain the illusion of family wealth. The amounts were staggering, nearly $500,000 diverted from retirement accounts, college funds, and investment portfolios belonging to people who trusted him with their financial futures. This was not just family betrayal anymore. This was criminal activity that would destroy lives beyond our own family circle. Children whose college funds had been raided, elderly clients whose retirement savings had been pillaged, young families whose nest eggs had been systematically stolen. I printed everything: financial statements, email chains, transfer records, and bank statements that painted a clear picture of ongoing fraud. Then I made copies and stored them in multiple locations, including a safety deposit box at a bank across town. With the evidence secured, I began phase 2 of my strategy, rebuilding the relationships they had torn apart. The first call was to my biological mother. Sarah Collins cried when she heard my voice. For 28 years she had wondered about the daughter who had been taken from her, believing I had rejected her attempts at contact. When I explained what I had learned about the blocked letters and visits, her relief was palpable. "I never stopped thinking about you," she sobbed. "Not a single day. I have boxes of letters I wrote but never sent because they told me you did not want to hear from me." Meeting Sarah was like looking into a mirror that reflected not just my physical features but my personality traits that had never made sense in my adoptive family. Her drive, her analytical mind, her fierce independence. These were the qualities that had set me apart from Emma and my adoptive parents. I was not the strange, cold outlier they had made me feel like. I was exactly like my real mother. Sarah was now a successful forensic accountant, having built a career that specialized in uncovering financial crimes. When I told her about my father's embezzlement, her professional instincts kicked in immediately. "This is not just about your family," she said, studying the documents I had printed. "These people he stole from deserve justice. We have to report this." But I was not ready to involve law enforcement yet. I had one more card to play, one more revelation that would complete the destruction of everything they had built on lies and stolen money. The private investigator I had hired to find Sarah had also been digging into my adoptive family's background. What he discovered about Emma changed everything I thought I knew about the golden child who could do no wrong. Emma was not just dating a married man. She was blackmailing him, using their relationship and intimate photos to extort money from Marcus Rivera, threatening to expose their affair to his wife and business partners unless he continued funding her lifestyle. The payments had been going on for months, escalating as her financial needs grew. My perfect sister was a criminal just like our father. The family that had painted me as cold and ungrateful while elevating Emma as the warm, loving daughter had been harboring two felons who had built their lives on deception and theft. Now I had everything I needed: evidence of embezzlement, blackmail, adoption, fraud, and financial elder abuse. The question was not whether I could destroy them but how thoroughly I wanted to dismantle the lives they had built on lies. The answer came to me as I sat in my penthouse looking out at the city I had conquered through my own merit and determination. They had tried to take everything from me based on lies. Now I would take everything from them based on the truth. The next phase of my plan required delicate timing and absolute precision. I could not simply dump all the evidence at once and hope for justice. This needed to be orchestrated like a symphony, with each revelation building upon the last until the entire foundation of their lies collapsed under its own weight. My first move was to reconnect with the clients my father had been stealing from, but not in the way they would expect. Through my real estate network, I had connections to several of the families whose funds had been diverted. I began reaching out under the pretense of business opportunities, carefully gauging their financial situations and trust in my father's management. What I discovered was heartbreaking. The Hendersons, a couple in their 70s, had no idea their retirement fund had been depleted to pay for Emma's art school tuition. Mrs. Henderson mentioned during a charity luncheon that they were considering downsizing their home because their investments had not performed as well as expected. The cruel irony was not lost on me that they were preparing to sacrifice their comfort because my father had stolen their security to fund my sister's vanity projects. The Williamson family was even worse off. Their twin daughters' college funds had been systematically drained over the past 3 years, leaving them scrambling to figure out how to pay for tuition that was supposed to be fully covered. Mr. Williamson had taken a second mortgage on their house, believing that market fluctuations had affected their carefully planned savings. Each story fueled my determination to see justice served, but it also complicated my strategy. These were not abstract victims in some financial crime drama. These were real people whose lives had been destroyed by my family's greed, and I owed them more than just revenge. I owed them restitution. That's when I made a decision that would define the entire operation. I would not just expose my family's crimes. I would personally ensure that every stolen dollar was returned to its rightful owners, even if it meant liquidating my own assets to make them whole. But first I needed to prevent any further damage. Working with Sarah, who had offered her expertise in forensic accounting, I began mapping every fraudulent transaction my father had made over the past 5 years. The pattern was clear. Whenever Emma needed money for a new venture or lifestyle upgrade, funds would mysteriously disappear from client accounts. The boutique that failed after 6 months had cost the Hendersons their vacation fund. Emma's luxury apartment deposit had come from the Williamson twins' college money. Even her designer wardrobe and expensive car had been funded through elder financial abuse of my father's most vulnerable clients. Sarah's professional network proved invaluable in documenting the extent of the fraud. She connected me with other forensic accountants who could testify to the criminal nature of the transactions, and with lawyers who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse cases. Meanwhile, I began setting traps for Emma and her blackmail operation. Through careful social engineering, I arranged for Marcus Rivera's wife to discover evidence of the affair but not the extortion. I wanted her to confront Marcus first to see how he would react when the pressure mounted. The confrontation happened exactly as I had predicted. Marcus panicked when his wife found the evidence I had strategically placed, and his first instinct was to pay Emma more money to keep quiet about their relationship. What he did not realize was that I had been monitoring his financial transactions through a contact at his bank, documenting every payment that proved the blackmail operation. With each payment, Marcus made the evidence against Emma grew stronger. She was digging her own grave, one extortion payment at a time, while I watched from the shadows and collected documentation that would destroy her credibility when the truth finally came to light. But the most crucial part of my strategy was building a coalition of allies who could not be dismissed or silenced when the revelations began. Sarah's professional reputation gave credibility to the financial evidence. The private investigator I had hired was a former FBI agent whose testimony would carry weight in any legal proceeding. I also reached out to my grandmother's estate attorney, the man who had originally set up the trust fund that my father had pillaged. When I showed him the evidence of what had been done with my inheritance, his outrage was immediate and professional. "This is not just theft," he said, reviewing the documents. "This is a systematic violation of fiduciary duty that goes back years. We can not only recover what was stolen, but we can pursue additional damages for breach of trust." The legal strategy began to take shape. We would file criminal charges against my father for embezzlement and elder abuse. Emma would face blackmail and extortion charges. But the civil suits would be where the real justice occurred, forcing them to make restitution to every client they had victimized. As the pieces fell into place, I realized I needed one more element to make the entire operation airtight. I needed my adoptive parents to incriminate themselves on record. The conversation in my penthouse had been emotional and revealing, but it would not hold up in court without corroboration. That's when I devised the most audacious part of my plan. I would invite them back to my penthouse under the pretense of reconsidering their proposal, but this time, every word would be recorded with equipment that met legal standards for evidence collection. The setup required careful choreography. I had to appear vulnerable and conflicted, as if the revelation about my adoption had left me questioning my place in the family and my right to keep what I had earned. I crafted a script that would lead them to repeat their demands and hopefully reveal more details about their financial manipulations. When I called my father to arrange the meeting, I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He believed that learning about my adoption had broken my spirit and made me more compliant with their wishes. He was eager to return and press their advantage. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him, infusing my voice with uncertainty and pain. "Maybe Emma does deserve a fresh start. Maybe I have been selfish about the penthouse." The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday afternoon. That gave me 6 days to perfect the recording setup, coordinate with my legal team, and prepare for what would either be the most satisfying confrontation of my life or a complete disaster that would alert them to my investigation. As Saturday approached, I found myself experiencing emotions I had not felt in years. Not fear or anxiety, but anticipation. For 28 years, I had felt like an outsider in my own family, constantly trying to prove my worth to people who had never seen me as truly theirs. Now I understood why. The girl who had never quite fit in, who had worked harder than everyone else for every scrap of approval, who had built an empire while her sister coasted on family money. That girl had not been broken or inadequate. She had been the victim of a systematic deception designed to make her grateful for scraps from people who were stealing her birthright. But that girl was gone. The woman sitting in the penthouse, surrounded by legal documents and recording equipment, was someone entirely different. Someone who had found her real family and discovered her true worth. Someone who was about to show the people who had raised her exactly what kind of person they had created through their lies and manipulation. This was not just about revenge anymore. This was about justice for every client they had stolen, from every lie they had told, every moment they had made me feel less than worthy of love and respect. This was about truth finally defeating decades of carefully constructed fiction. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the final act was about to begin. Everything they had built on lies and stolen money was about to come crashing down, and I was going to watch it happen from the penthouse they had tried to steal from me. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made Manhattan look like a postcard. I had spent the morning doing final equipment checks with my legal team, ensuring every recording device was perfectly positioned and legally compliant. The penthouse had been transformed into a carefully orchestrated stage where the final act of this family drama would play out. Sarah arrived an hour before my adoptive parents were scheduled to appear. Having my biological mother there for moral support felt like closing a circle that had been broken 28 years ago. She reviewed the legal documents one final time, her forensic accountant's eye-catching details that even our lawyers had missed. "Remember," she said, squeezing my hand, "let them talk. The more they explain their reasoning, the more evidence we collect. They think they're negotiating with a broken daughter who just learned she was adopted. Use that assumption against them." When the doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, I felt a calm settle over me that I had never experienced before. This was not nervousness or anticipation anymore. This was the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards and was about to play the winning hand. They entered my penthouse like conquerors, returning to claim territory they had always considered theirs. Dad carried the same manila folder from our previous meeting while Mom surveyed my home with the calculating eye of someone already redecorating in her mind. Emma followed behind them, her guilt from our last encounter apparently forgotten in the excitement of acquiring prime Manhattan real estate. "Madison, honey," Mom began, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "you look terrible. Have you been sleeping? This adoption revelation must be so difficult for you." I played my part perfectly, allowing vulnerability to creep into my voice. "It has been hard. Learning that everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. It makes me question whether I really deserve what I have earned." Dad leaned forward, sensing weakness like a predator smelling blood. "That is exactly why we are here. Family is about more than blood, Madison. We raised you, we loved you, we gave you opportunities. Now it is time to give back to the family that made you who you are." The recording equipment captured every word as he launched into a speech about family obligations and shared wealth. But what he said next went far beyond anything I had hoped for. "Look, the truth is we have some financial pressures right now. Some of my investment strategies have not panned out the way I expected, and several clients are asking difficult questions about their account performance. Emma getting the penthouse would solve a lot of problems for all of us." Emma shifted uncomfortably, and I realized she knew more about their financial crimes than I had suspected. "Dad," she said quietly, "maybe we should not go into all the details right now." But Dad was on a roll, his desperation making him careless. "No, Emma, she needs to understand the full situation. Madison, some of the money we used to help Emma over the years came from your trust fund. We borrowed against it thinking your real estate success would make it easy to pay back. But with the market changes and some client issues, we need to restructure our approach." There it was, a full confession to embezzling my trust fund, delivered directly to high-quality recording equipment in the presence of witnesses. But I needed more. "What kind of client issues?" I asked, injecting concern into my voice. "Is your business in trouble?" Mom shot Dad a warning look, but he was too committed to his manipulation strategy to stop. "Some clients are questioning investment losses that were necessary to maintain family stability. They do not understand that successful financial management sometimes requires moving money between accounts to maximize opportunities." I glanced at Sarah, who was sitting quietly in the corner, and saw her raise her eyebrows. In forensic accounting terms, what Dad had just described was textbook embezzlement with a side of fraud. He was essentially admitting to stealing from his clients while framing it as sophisticated financial strategy. Emma finally found her voice. Madison, I know this is a lot to process, but think about what this family has done for you. Without us, you would have grown up in foster care or with a teenage mother who could not provide for you. We saved you from that life. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. They had not saved me from anything. They had stolen me from a mother who loved me and wanted me, then used my gratitude for their rescue to justify decades of emotional manipulation and financial theft. You are right, I said, standing up and walking to my desk. I owe this family everything, which is why I have something to give you. I pulled out a thick folder and handed it to Dad. These are documents I think you will find very interesting. They detail exactly what I owe you and what you owe me. Dad opened the folder and I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. Bank records, email printouts, financial statements showing every fraudulent transaction, every stolen dollar, every lie they had told to cover their crimes. Where did you get these? He whispered. From your own records, Dad. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Did you really think I would not investigate after learning my entire life was built on lies? Mom grabbed the folder from his hands, her face going white as she flipped through page after page of evidence. Madison, you do not understand what you are looking at. These transactions were all legitimate financial management decisions. Really, I said, pulling out my phone and playing back a recording of Dad's confession from just minutes earlier. His own voice filled the room. Some clients are questioning investment losses that were necessary to maintain family stability. Emma stood up abruptly. What is this? What are you doing? I am doing what you taught me to do, Emma. I am taking care of family. Sarah, would you please come over here? Sarah rose from her chair, and I watched my adoptive family realize that they were not alone. Mom, Dad, Emma, I would like you to meet Sarah Collins, my real mother. The woman you told me never wanted to see me. The woman you have been lying about for 28 years. The silence in the room was deafening. Dad's face had gone from white to gray, while Mom stared at Sarah with the expression of someone seeing a ghost. Emma just looked confused, as if she could not process how the careful plan they had laid was falling apart so quickly. You see, I continued while you were planning to steal my penthouse. I was planning something much more comprehensive. I have evidence of embezzlement, elder abuse, financial fraud, and blackmail. Yes, Emma, I know about Marcus Rivera and your little extortion scheme. Emma collapsed back into her chair as if her legs had given out. How could you possibly know about that, the same way I know about everything else? Investigation, documentation, and planning, the three skills you never bothered to learn because you thought Daddy's stolen money would always be there to catch you. Dad finally found his voice. Madison, if you turn us in, it will destroy the entire family. Think about what that means. I looked at these three people who had shaped my life through lies and manipulation and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. You are absolutely right, Dad. It will destroy this family completely. That is exactly what I am counting on. The moment those words left my mouth, the carefully constructed facade they had maintained for decades shattered completely. Dad lunged for the folder of evidence as if destroying the physical documents could somehow undo the digital copies stored in multiple locations. Mom began crying with the desperate intensity of someone whose world was ending. Emma just sat frozen, staring at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. You cannot do this to your family, Dad said, his voice shaking with rage and panic. We raised you, we loved you, we gave you everything you needed to succeed. You gave me trauma, lies, and a lifetime of feeling inadequate, I replied calmly. What you call love, I call manipulation. What you call family, I call a criminal enterprise built on stealing from vulnerable people. Sarah stepped forward, her professional demeanor taking over. Mr. Patterson, as a forensic accountant, I have reviewed every document in that folder. What you have done constitutes systematic embezzlement, elder abuse, and fiduciary fraud. The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. Dad turned his fury on Sarah, revealing the ugly prejudices that had probably shaped how he viewed my adoption from the beginning. You have no right to be here. You gave up any claim to Madison 28 years ago when you took our money and signed those papers. Actually, Sarah said, producing her own folder, I never willingly gave up anything. The documents Madison uncovered show that you coerced a 17-year-old girl into surrendering her child through financial pressure and outright lies. That constitutes adoption fraud, which has no statute of limitations in New York. The revelation that they could face charges for the adoption itself seemed to break something in Mom. Her tears turned to hysterical sobbing as the full scope of their legal exposure became clear. "We just wanted to give you a better life," she wailed. Sarah was too young, too poor, too unstable to raise a child properly. Sarah was 17 and scared, I said, my voice rising with 28 years of suppressed anger. She was manipulated by adults who should have helped her, not exploited her vulnerability for their own purposes. You bought a baby from a teenager, then spent decades making that baby feel grateful for being purchased. Emma finally spoke, her voice small and defeated. "Madison, what do you want from us? What will make this stop?" The question hung in the air like smoke. What did I want? Revenge had been my initial motivation, but sitting there surrounded by the wreckage of their lies, I realized my goals had evolved far beyond simple retaliation. "I want justice," I said. "For every client whose retirement you stole, for every family whose college funds you raided, for every elderly person whose trust you violated, for the 17-year-old girl you manipulated into giving up her child, for the 28 years of lies you told to cover your crimes." But mostly I continued looking directly at each of them. "I want you to face the consequences of your choices without being able to hide behind family obligation or emotional manipulation." Dad made one final attempt at negotiation. "If this goes public, it will ruin your reputation too. People will question how you could not have known about your adoption, about my business practices. Your real estate empire will suffer." I almost laughed at his desperation. "Dad, my reputation is built on honest business practices and genuine achievement. Learning that I succeeded despite being raised by criminals will only make my story more compelling. But your reputation, your business, Emma's social standing, those will not survive what comes next." The sound of my phone buzzing broke the tense silence. I glanced at the screen and smiled. That would be my attorney confirming that the criminal complaints have been filed with the district attorney's office. "As of 5 minutes ago, you are all officially under investigation for multiple felonies." Emma shot to her feet. "You called the police. While we were sitting here, I called the appropriate authorities, yes. Did you think this was a negotiation? Did you think I would give you time to destroy evidence or flee the jurisdiction? You trained me well, Emma. I learned to plan ahead and always have a backup strategy." What happened next revealed the true character of each family member when faced with consequences for their actions. Dad immediately began calculating damage control, trying to figure out which evidence could be challenged and which witnesses could be discredited. Mom retreated into denial, insisting that everything had been a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with proper legal representation. But Emma surprised me. Instead of panic or anger, she seemed to deflate entirely, as if the weight of her crimes had finally become too heavy to carry. "How long have you known about Marcus?" she asked quietly. "Months," I replied. "I saw him with his wife and children at a charity event while you were telling me about your new relationship. I could have warned you then that he was married, but I chose to protect you instead. That was my mistake." Emma nodded slowly, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "I knew it was wrong. The blackmail, I mean. But I needed the money and he had so much, and I thought just a little bit would not hurt anyone. A little bit became a lot very quickly, did not it? And it did hurt someone. It hurt his wife, his children, and ultimately you. But mostly, it revealed who you really are when you think no one is watching." Dad was frantically making phone calls, trying to reach lawyers and accountants who could help minimize their legal exposure. But I had anticipated this too. Working with Sarah's network, I had already contacted the most prominent financial crime attorneys in the city, creating conflicts of interest that would prevent them from representing my family. The beauty of thorough planning was watching their options disappear in real time. Every call Dad made resulted in rejection or unavailability. Every strategy they attempted had already been anticipated and countered. "You cannot have thought of everything," Mom said desperately. "There has to be some way to work this out within the family." "There is no family anymore," I said simply. "You made sure of that when you decided to steal from me and lie to me for decades. What happens now is not about family relationships, it is about criminal justice and civil restitution." The doorbell rang again and I walked over to answer it. 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit stood in the hallway looking professional and slightly apologetic about interrupting what was obviously a family gathering. "Miss Patterson, we are here about the criminal complaints filed this afternoon. We need to speak with Robert Patterson, Linda Patterson, and Emma Patterson." I stepped aside and gestured toward my former family. "They are all here, officers. Please come in." As the detectives entered my penthouse and began reading rights to the people who had raised me, I felt a strange sense of completion. The scared, confused woman who had learned about her adoption 3 weeks ago was gone. The daughter who had spent decades seeking approval from people who saw her as a convenient source of income was gone. What remained was someone harder, clearer, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who tried to manipulate or deceive her. The girl they had shaped through lies had become the woman who would destroy them with truth. The collapse had begun, and there would be no rebuilding from the ashes of what they had done. 6 months later, I stood in the same penthouse where my old life had ended and my real life had begun. The view had not changed, but everything else was different. The space felt lighter, somehow cleansed of the toxic energy that had poisoned it during those final family confrontations. The legal proceedings had unfolded exactly as Sarah and I had planned. Dad received 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement and elder abuse. The evidence was so overwhelming that his attorney advised him to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. Mom received 3 years for her role as an accessory, though her cooperation in helping recover stolen assets earned her some consideration from the court. Emma's case was more complex. The blackmail charges were serious, but her breakdown during questioning revealed the psychological pressure she had lived under as the golden child who could never fail. She received 2 years with the possibility of early release for good behavior and completion of therapy programs. But prison sentences were only part of the justice served. The civil suits resulted in complete financial restitution for every client my father had robbed. The Hendersons got their retirement fund back with interest. The Williamson twins had their college money restored and then some. Every family that had trusted my father with their financial future was made whole again. The restitution process required liquidating most of my family's assets. Their house, cars, investment accounts, and Emma's expensive belongings were all sold to pay back the people they had victimized. In the end, they lost everything they had built on stolen money, which seemed like perfect poetic justice. My own role in the recovery process had been voluntary but substantial. I used my real estate expertise to help maximize the value of their asset sales, and I personally covered gaps where the math did not quite add up. Seeing Mrs. Henderson cry with relief when she learned her retirement was secure made every penny worth it. The adoption fraud case took longer to resolve, but the outcome was equally satisfying. The private agency that had facilitated my illegal placement was shut down, and several of its employees faced criminal charges. Sarah and I testified before a grand jury about the coercion and deception involved in my adoption, helping to establish precedents that would protect other young mothers in the future. But beyond the legal victories, the most profound change was the family I had gained in the process. Sarah had become not just my mother but my closest friend and business advisor. Her forensic accounting skills proved invaluable as I expanded my real estate empire, and her unwavering support helped me heal from decades of emotional manipulation. Through Sarah, I met my half-brother David, a brilliant software engineer who had grown up wondering about the sister our mother had lost. We connected instantly over shared traits and experiences that made perfect sense once we understood our genetic relationship. The analytical minds, the fierce independence, the drive to succeed despite obstacles. These were Collins' family characteristics, not personality defects, that set me apart from the Pattersons. I also reconnected with my maternal grandmother, Elizabeth Collins, who had never stopped hoping to meet the granddaughter who had been taken away. At 82, she was sharp as a razor and furious about the decades of lost time. Our first meeting involved 3 hours of tears, followed by 6 hours of her showing me family photos and telling stories about relatives I had never known existed. "You have your great-grandmother's eyes," she said, pointing to a sepia photograph of a stern-looking woman in Victorian dress. "Margaret Collins never backed down from a fight either. She would be proud of what you did to those people who stole you." The most unexpected addition to my chosen family was Marcus Rivera's ex-wife, Patricia. After their divorce was finalized and the truth about Emma's blackmail came out, Patricia reached out to thank me for exposing the situation. What started as a grateful phone call evolved into a genuine friendship built on shared experiences of betrayal and recovery. "You saved my children from growing up in a house built on lies," she told me over lunch at a cafe near her new apartment. "I will never be able to repay that gift." Patricia's strength in rebuilding her life after discovering her husband's affairs and financial irresponsibility inspired me to think about my own future differently. She showed me that surviving betrayal did not have to leave you bitter or closed off to new relationships. It could make you more selective, more aware of red flags, but also more appreciative of genuine connections. My penthouse, which had been the prize my adoptive family tried to steal, became the headquarters for a new kind of family gathering. Sunday dinners now included Sarah, David, Elizabeth, Patricia, and her children, and a rotating cast of friends who had proven themselves trustworthy through actions rather than blood relation. These dinners were everything my childhood family meals had never been. Honest conversations about successes and failures. Celebrations of achievements without resentment or competition. Support during difficult times without strings attached or expectations of payback. Love given freely rather than as a transaction requiring constant gratitude. The business empire I had built continued to grow, but now it had a deeper purpose. I started a foundation that helped young single mothers avoid the kind of exploitation Sarah had faced. The foundation provided legal advocacy, financial counseling, and housing assistance to ensure that desperation could not be used against vulnerable women making difficult decisions about their children's futures. I also created a scholarship program for children who had been adopted under questionable circumstances. Having lived through the confusion and identity struggles that come with learning your entire history was fabricated, I wanted to provide resources and support for others navigating similar revelations. The most satisfying part of my new life was the absence of performance anxiety. For 28 years I had worked frantically to prove my worth to people who would never truly accept me. Every achievement had been measured against their approval rather than my own satisfaction. Every success had been diminished by their subtle suggestions that I owed it to family support rather than personal merit. Now, surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was rather than who they wanted me to be, I could finally enjoy my accomplishments. The penthouse was not just real estate anymore. It was a sanctuary filled with genuine relationships and honest conversations. Looking back on the destruction of my adoptive family, I felt no regret about the choices I had made. They had taught me valuable lessons about manipulation, deception, and the difference between real love and transactional relationships. Those lessons made me a better judge of character and a more effective advocate for justice. But they had also taught me unintentionally about resilience. Growing up feeling like an outsider had made me self-reliant and determined. Being constantly questioned about my worthiness had made me work harder and achieve more than I might have otherwise. Their attempts to diminish me had actually forged me into someone stronger than they could have imagined. Have you ever discovered that your entire family history was built on lies that changed everything about how you saw yourself? What would you do if you found out your parents had been stealing from vulnerable people to fund your siblings' lifestyle while making you feel guilty for your own success? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on family loyalty versus justice. If this story of uncovering decades of deception and getting the ultimate revenge resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories. Share this with anyone who needs to hear about standing up to toxic family members and choosing your own path to healing. Thank you for taking this journey with me through one of the most challenging and transformative periods of my life. Remember that blood does not make family. Love, respect, and genuine support make family. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who see you as an obligation rather than a blessing, even when those people raised you. Life is too short to spend it seeking approval from people who will never truly value who you are.